It clings to the potato skins I'm peeling, an earthy, decaying perfume that fills the stone scullery. It's in the damp mortar between the stones, and it's on me. The rot of disgrace. It's the only scent I let anyone catch. Beyond the kitchen's archway, the great hall throbs with a different energy. Polished oak and spiced meat, the oiled leather of dress uniforms, the crisp, clean smell of power. They're preparing for him, Alpha Thorn of the Iron Claw, the butcher of Grey Run. The man whose brother my father sliced open under a flag of truce. My hands don't shake as I work the blade. Shaking is a luxury for those with hope. I am Sable, daughter of Ronan the Betrayer, and my life is a monument to a debt that can never be paid. I am a ghost they force to scrub their floors. You, girl. The voice is a whip crack from the doorway. Marta, the head cook, her face perpetually flushed with malice. The Alpha wants the hall floor mopped. Again! Before they arrive, get to it. It's not a request. It's another calculated stain. Mop the floor the dignitaries will walk on. Let the traitor's daughter kneel at their feet. Let Thorn see how thoroughly we debase the memory of his enemy. I don't nod. I just rise, my back aching from hours at the sink, and move to the slop bucket and the rough-hewn mop. The weight of the pack's gaze follows me like a physical shove as I cross the threshold from the kitchen's shadows into the vast torch-lit expanse of the great hall. It's empty save for a few betas hanging the last of the silver-flecked banners. They fall silent as I enter. Their eyes aren't hostile, not anymore. That would require energy. It's a colder thing. Dismissal. I am less than the dust motes dancing in the high sunbeams. I kneel on the cold flagstones, the water in my bucket smelling of lye and lemon rind. The repetitive swish of the mop is the only sound. Swish, drag, a mantra to drown out the memory of my father's laughter, once so warm, now forever twisted into a traitor's grin in my mind. The day they dragged him out, he didn't look at me. Not once. Swish! Drag! A door booms open at the far end of the hall. Alpha Gareth enters with his inner circle. His scent, frost and iron, washes down the room, like making my nape prickle. I shrink smaller, becoming part of the floor. He will be here within the hour. Gareth's voice echoes, crisp and devoid of warmth. He has refused the initial offers. Land does not interest him. Gold is an insult. Then what does he want? Someone asks, a nervous edge to their voice. Blood remembers, Gareth says, and the words feel like an icy finger tracing my spine. I keep mopping, a slow, steady retreat towards the kitchen archway. He wants a symbol, a testament that the debt is acknowledged. He wants the past laid to rest, and he will only accept a tribute carved from the flesh of that past. I feel the shift in the air before the words are spoken. It's a sudden, chilling focus. The girl, Gareth says, his voice now directly above me. I freeze, the mop handle slick in my grip. She serves at the feast tonight, at the foot of the high table. Let Thorn look upon the living remainder of his grievance. Let him see that we do not hide from what was done. We offer it to him on a platter. A bitter taste floods my mouth. A platter, a thing. I am to be a centerpiece of my own humiliation, a living, breathing apology. The betas murmur assent. It's a brilliant, cruel piece of politics. Offer the symbol without losing anything of real value. Offer me. Before I can move, a heavy hand lands on my shoulder. It's Kieran, Gareth's head of security. You heard your Alpha, Sable, he says, his breath hot in my ear. You will be on display. You will be silent. You will be nothing. That is what you are good for. Now finish the floor. It must shine for your new master. He shoves me forward. The mop clatters. Water slops over the stone, darkening it like a stain. New master. The words coil in my gut, a serpent of pure dread. The suppression herbs I chew every morning feel suddenly thin, brittle. The careful, invisible wall I've built around the secret core of me, the dangerous, hidden truth I've spent a lifetime smothering, feels like it's cracking. Because I am not just the traitor's daughter. And if he sees it, if Thorn, with his butcher's instincts and his hunger for vengeance, senses what even my own pack has been too blind to notice, the rot in the air isn't just from the potatoes anymore. It's the smell of a carefully buried past about to be dug up with claws. And the first tremble, deep and seismic, begins in my hands. Silence is a cage. I wear mine as they dress me. A rough-spun grey dress, the colour of ashes and submission. No shoes. My hair is brushed harshly back and bound so tightly my scalp screams. They want my face visible. They want every feature, my father's sharp cheekbones, his dark eyes, laid bare for inspection. I am a portrait of guilt framed in drab wool. They position me at the foot of the high table, to the left of Alpha Gareth's great carved chair, a living statue. My knees press into the cold stone, a formal posture of obeisance. The hall fills. The Silverfang elite take their places, their scents a cocktail of anxiety, pride, and sharp curiosity. They don't look at me. I'm part of the architecture. Then the air changes. It doesn't enter with a breeze, it conquers. A scent of pine needles crushed under a heavy boot, of frost biting deep into iron ore, of a cold, clear sky over a battlefield at dawn. It sweeps through the hall, silencing the last murmurs. My own breath hitches in my throat, a purely instinctual reaction to a dominant predatory presence. Alpha Thorn enters. He is not a large man, not like the mountainous betas who flank him. He is all lethal economy. Hair the colour of a raven's wing, cropped close. A face that looks carved from granite, unyielding and severe. His eyes are the colour of a winter sea, a pale, merciless grey. They sweep the room, and where they land, a chill follows. He doesn't acknowledge Gareth's nod. He takes the seat of honour opposite, his two warriors, one a grizzled veteran with a scarred lip, the other younger, watchful, standing rigid behind him. The veteran's gaze lingers on me for a half-second, his nostrils flaring slightly. A hunter's assessment. The feast begins, platters of meat, baskets of bread, rivers of wine. It's a pantomime of hospitality. Gareth speaks of borderlines, of shared hunting grounds in the Cedar Valley, of a tribute of prime pelts and forged steel. Thorn picks at his food. He doesn't speak. His silence is a pressure, collapsing the hall in on itself. The Cedar Valley is generous, Gareth presses, a strain entering his voice. It would bolster your pack's reserves for 3 winters. Thorn sets his knife down. The click on the pewter plate is like a gunshot. His voice, when it comes, is low, devoid of inflection, and cuts through the chatter like a blade through silk. I do not need your valleys, Gareth. My lands are sufficient. Your pelts are inferior. Your steel is soft. The insult hangs, glittering and deadly. A beta on Gareth's side lets out a low growl. Thorn's eyes flick to him, and the growl dies in the man's throat. Then name your price for peace, Gareth says, his jaw tight. What would satisfy the iron-clawed debt? Thorn's gaze leaves Gareth. It travels slowly, deliberately, down the length of the high table, over the faces of the Silverfang elite who shrink from its touch. It passes over the steaming platters, the glittering cups. It slides inexorably to the foot of the table. To me, his pale eyes lock onto mine. There is no curiosity in them, no anger. It is the pure, dispassionate focus of a man identifying a landmark on a map. A rock, a tree, a stain. The entire hall holds its breath. There, Thorn says. The single word drops into the silence. He lifts a hand, not pointing, but indicating, a gesture of selection. The girl. My heart stops. The noise of the hall, the crackle of the hearth, the shift of fabric recedes into a dull, roaring rush in my ears. I am a stone stain. Gareth blinks, thrown. The servant? She is no servant, Thorn says, his voice still that terrible, calm monotone. She is Ronan's get, the blood of the betrayer. You keep it here, in your hall? You let it touch your food? He says, it. The word is more violent than a slap. She is a reminder of our shame, Gareth recovers, his tone turning smooth, politic. She serves her penance. Penance, Thorn repeats, as if tasting the word and finding it bland. I am not interested in your poetic justice. The debt is not to you, it is to me, to my dead. He leans forward just slightly. You wish to settle this? You wish for me to take my wolves and leave your borders in peace? Then give me the flesh of the debt. Give me her. A shocked murmur ripples through the Silverfangs. This is not about land or wealth. It is primal. It is about a body for a body. Gareth's mind works behind his eyes. I can see it. The cold calculus. He looks from Thorn's implacable face to me, kneeling in grey rags, a piece of trash versus a lasting peace. The equation is obscenely simple. A living tribute, Gareth says, slowly, as if considering. The performance is flawless. To show the depth of our regret. To finally lay the past to rest. He nods, a statesman's grave decision. Very well. The girl is yours, Alpha Thorn, a symbol of our sincerity. No. The word is a silent scream in the vault of my skull. My blood turns to ice, then to fire. The careful numbness I've worn for years shatters. A violent, volatile heat surges up from the pit of my being. A panic so profound it feels like my very cells are revolting. and with it, rising like a deadly counter-melody to the scent of pine and iron, comes another scent, sweet, cloying, richer than honey, warmer than summer earth. It is the scent of open blossom and ripe fruit, of a vitality so potent it is dizzying. My scent, uncontrolled. It leaks from my pores, a silent, screaming betrayal. It doesn't just fill my immediate space, it rolls. A visible tension seizes the wolves in the hall. Heads snap toward me. Betas on both sides of the table inhale sharply, their eyes glazing over with a sudden, instinctive hunger. A low, collective rumble vibrates through the stone floor. Thorn's head whips around. His dispassionate mask evaporates. His pale eyes widen, not with shock, but with a dawning, terrifying comprehension. He sees it. He sees me. Not the traitor's daughter, not the symbol, the Omega. His face transforms. The granite cracks, revealing the volcanic fury beneath. A snarl twists his lips, a sound of pure, undiluted possession. He is on his feet, in a blur of motion. Out! The command isn't a word. It's a detonation. It's alpha power made sonic, crashing against the walls, vibrating in the teeth of every person present. It brooks no argument, no hesitation. Chairs scrape, people stumble. The hall empties in a chaotic, terrified rush, driven by the combined force of his will and the destabilizing, delicious havoc of my scent. In seconds, it's just us. The empty hall, the scattered feast, the crackling fire. And Thorn. He stands over me, his chest heaving, his winter sea eyes now a blazing, tempestuous grey. The scent of his power, the pine, the frost, the iron, engulfs me, mixes with mine, creating a dizzying, dangerous cocktail. He looks down at the pitiful, shaking thing on the floor, the secret now screaming into the silence. His voice, when he speaks again, is a guttural rasp, a vow etched in stone and sealed in fire. She is mine. The world had shrunk to 2 points, the cold, hard press of the flagstone against my knees, and the inferno blazing behind my ribs. Out, he had said, and they had gone. The scrape of chairs, the scuffle of boots, the muffled curses, all swallowed by the roaring in my ears. The silence left behind was louder than the chaos. It was the silence of a tomb, and I was the sacrifice laid upon its altar. My own scent filled my nose, thick and cloying. It smelled like a stranger, like a lie I'd told for so long it had finally broken open and revealed its rotting truth. Omega. The word echoed, not in the hall, but in the hollows of my bones. It wasn't a designation. It was a death sentence. I couldn't look up. I stared at the water-dark patch on the stone where I'd spilled my bucket. My reflection in it was a blur of grey and terror. His boots entered my line of sight. Not the polished dress boots of the Silver Fang elite, but worn, sturdy leather, scarred and dusty from the trail. They stopped an inch from my trembling hand. I could smell him now, too, without the interference of the crowd. Pine and iron, yes, but beneath it, a heat like a banked forge, a predator's warmth. Look at me. His voice wasn't the roar from before. It was low, a command, but a contained one. It vibrated through the stone and up my spine. I couldn't. My body was no longer my own. It was a traitorous, trembling vessel, broadcasting my weakness to the one person in the world who would know exactly how to use it. A hand, large and calloused, came into view. It didn't touch me. It simply waited, palm up, in the space between us. A silent demand. A violent, shameful tear broke free and splashed onto the back of my own hand. The humiliation of it, the absolute loss of control, unlocked something. A spark of the old defiance, the one that had kept me breathing in the scullery. I forced my chin up. His face was closer than I expected. He had crouched down. The severe lines of it were stark in the flickering torchlight. His pale eyes were no longer distant. They were absorbing. They scanned my face with a terrifying intensity, tracing my father's features but seeing past them, reading the panic, the shock, the raw, unbidden power leaking from my every pore. "You hid this," he said. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation of a different crime. I tried to speak. My throat was dust. The word was a broken croak. "How long?" His gaze dropped to my neck as if he could see the ghost of suppression herbs in my veins. The herbs, the blockers. How long have you been choking it down? He knew. Of course he knew. He saw the mechanism of the lie because he'd been looking for a weapon, and instead he'd found a vault. And now the vault was blown open, and the treasure inside was flooding out uncontrollable, ruining everything. A fresh wave of that debilitating heat crested within me, a cramping, urgent ache that made me gasp and curl in on myself. The scent in the air thickened, sweetening unbearably. Thorn flinched. actually flinched. A crack in his own formidable control. His jaw clenched so tight I heard the muscle pop. The hand that wasn't held out to me curled into a fist on his knee, the knuckles white. "You are a fool," he hissed, the words laced with a fury that didn't seem directed entirely at me. "To hide this, here, among them, you are a lit fuse in a room of gunpowder." He was right. I had been a fool. I'd thought my greatest danger was disdain. I hadn't understood that my true nature, revealed, would turn disdain into a frenzy. I hadn't understood that I was the gunpowder. "I didn't mean to," I choked out, the admission pathetic. "Intent is irrelevant," he snapped. His eyes flicked toward the main doors, as if expecting a horde to break them down, drawn by the siren song of my vulnerability. What matters is what is, and what is mine. Mine. The word landed differently this time. It wasn't just a claim of possession. It was a statement of responsibility, a grim, furious acceptance of a catastrophic problem. He uncurled his fist and, moving with a sudden, decisive speed, did what he hadn't done before. He touched me. His hand didn't grab my arm. It closed around my wrist. His skin was searingly hot, a brand against my feverish chill. A jolt, electric and profound, shot up my arm, scattering my panic for a single crystalline second. It wasn't pleasure. It wasn't pain. It was a recognition, a deep, resonant hum between his alpha energy and the omega chaos screaming inside me. For a fleeting moment, the tormenting heat focused, channeled by his touch. His breath caught. He felt it too. His grey eyes widened, looking down at where his hand encircled my wrist, at the visible tremor that passed through both of us. The revelation there was even more staggering than the discovery of what I was. It was the first, undeniable spark of the thing our kinds called the mate bond, a live wire connecting us in the middle of this ruin. He dropped my wrist like it had burned him. The loss of contact was a physical agony, leaving me cold and adrift again. The heat rushed back, more overwhelming than before. A whimper escaped me. Thorn shot to his feet, looming over me, a storm of conflicting impulses warring on his face, revulsion, fury, and that new blazing possessiveness. "Get up." The command was ragged. I couldn't. My limbs were liquid. He swore a low, vicious curse. Then he bent, and before I could protest, an arm hooked under my knees and another behind my back. He lifted me as if I weighed nothing. I was cradled against the hard wall of his chest, surrounded by the scent of pine and forge fire and fury. My head lolled against his shoulder. The world tilted and blurred. This was the unmaking. Not just of my secret, but of me. Sable, the ghost, the drudge, was gone. In her place was this trembling, scent-drenched creature, carried like spoils of war by the enemy. He strode across the empty hall, his boots echoing in the cavernous silence. He didn't head for the main doors where the pack waited. He turned toward a small, recessed servants' entrance near the kitchens, the one I'd used 1,000 times. Just before he shouldered the door open, he looked down at me. His expression was unreadable, carved from shadow and resolve. "The debt is paid, Silverfang," he murmured, but the words weren't for Gareth. They were for me, a dark promise. "Now you owe a new one, to me." Then the darkness of the passageway swallowed us, and the world I knew was gone. Consciousness returned in layers, each one colder than the last. First the smell, not pine and iron, but stone. Old, dry, deep earth stone, and cold air, so crisp it felt sharp in my nostrils. There was no scent of rot, no smell of cooking grease or pack. It was sterile, empty. Then, the feel. I was lying on something flat and firm, draped in a coarse wool blanket. Not a mattress, a pallet. My body ached with a deep systemic exhaustion, as if I'd run for days. The frantic, clawing heat had receded, not gone, but banked. A dormant ember in my core, waiting. Finally, the sight. I opened my eyes to a grey ceiling hewn from smooth rock. The light was indirect, filtering in from a high, narrow window, an arrow slit, really. It cast a pale, late-afternoon beam onto the opposite wall. I sat up slowly, the wool scratching my skin. The room was small, maybe 10 paces square. The walls were the same unadorned stone. A simple wooden chest. A washstand with a chipped ceramic pitcher and bowl. A single, unlit iron sconce, no fireplace. It was a cell, but it was clean. Starkly clean, and it was his. I could smell him here in the very grain of the stone. His scent, that winter-forged signature, was embedded in this place. It wasn't the overwhelming wave from the hall. It was a permanent, quiet resonance. The Alpha's den. I was in the heart of his territory. Panic, thin and icy, began to trickle back. I pushed off the blanket and stood on shaky legs. My grey dress was rumpled but intact. I went to the window. It was too high to see out of, only a slice of iron-grey sky. The air that flowed through was biting. The door was heavy oak, banded with iron. There was no lock on the inside. I was a prisoner. But the nature of the cage was confusing. This wasn't a dungeon. It was a monk's cell, a place of stark, severe containment. As if my thought had summoned him, a key turned in the lock with a solid clunk. The door opened, not Thorn. A man stood there, older, with a grizzled, weathered face and a scar that pulled his lip into a permanent half-sneer. The veteran from the hall. He carried a tray, a simple wooden bowl of stew, a hunk of dark bread, a tin cup of water. His eyes, a flinty brown, took me in with a single, assessing sweep. There was no malice in his gaze, but no warmth either. It was the look a guard gives a valuable, dangerous animal. "You're awake," he said. His voice was gravelly. "Eat." He set the tray on the chest and stepped back, leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed. He wasn't leaving. I didn't move toward the food. My throat was too tight. "Where is he?" "The Alpha is dealing with the aftermath of your departure." The way he said departure was dry as dust. "My name is Rook. I am his beta." "Am I to be executed?" The question came out flat. I was too tired for fear. Rook's eyebrow twitched, the closest he might come to a smile. "If the Alpha wanted you dead, you'd be cooling in the Silverfang Hall. He claimed you. That makes you his problem, and his responsibility." Problem. Responsibility. The same words Thorn had used, twisted together. "What does that mean?" I whispered. "It means you are under his protection, which, in this pack, is the same thing as being under his thumb." Rook nodded to the tray. "It means you eat what's given, you stay where you're put, and you learn the rules." "What rules?" "Rule 1, you do not leave this room unless escorted, by me or by him. Rule 2, you do not, under any circumstances, let that scent of yours loose again. The herbs you were using are a child's toy. We have something stronger, you'll take it. Rule 3, he paused, his flinty eyes hardening. You remember what you are, not just an Omega. You are the daughter of the man who murdered our Alpha's brother. You are a symbol of a great pain. The Alpha may have claimed you, but to the rest of Ironclaw you are a ghost of a traitor. You step wrong, and not even his claim will stop a knife in the dark from someone who loved Kieran." Kieran. Thorn's brother. He gave the debt a name. It made the stone walls feel closer. "So I'm a protected prisoner in a hostile land," I said, the numbness returning. It was a familiar cloak. "You're a complication," Rook corrected bluntly. "One he didn't need but now has to manage. Eat, you'll need your strength." He pushed off the door frame and left, pulling the door shut. The key turned again. The sound was final. I looked at the stew. It smelled of venison and root vegetables, plain hearty. I was ravenous, a deep, hollow hunger that felt connected to the spent fire in my veins. I ate standing up, the bread stale but filling. The water was cold and clean. As I ate, I took in more details. There was a second door in the wall opposite the window, narrower. I set the tray down and tried it. It was unlocked. It led to a small utilitarian bathing closet, a stone drain in the floor, a bucket of clean water, a sliver of hard soap, and a folded rough linen towel. A chamber pot in the corner. The basics for maintaining a body, not for comfort. I returned to the main room, the ember in my core flickering with a fresh, slow-burning anger. This was my value, a problem to be managed, a body to be fed and cleaned and kept quiet. The light from the slit window faded into twilight. The room grew colder. I wrapped the scratchy blanket around my shoulders and sat on the pallet, my back against the stone wall. Hours passed, measured by the deepening chill. Then the key turned again. Thorn filled the doorway. He had changed from his formal clothes into worn black trousers and a grey tunic, the sleeves rolled up over his forearms. He looked tired. The severity of his features was etched even deeper by shadow. He carried a small, dark glass bottle. He didn't enter fully. He stood on the threshold, his gaze sweeping the room, noting the empty tray, the blanket around me before landing on my face. The pale eyes were unreadable in the dim light. "Rook explained your situation," he said, his voice a low rumble in the quiet room. "My cage, you mean?" "Your sanctuary," he countered, a sharp edge in his tone. "Out there, you are a trigger, a cause for chaos. In here, you are contained, safe. From your pack, or from myself? Both." He stepped inside then, closing the door but not locking it. His presence shrank the room, heating the cold air with the raw energy he carried. He held up the bottle. "This is a tincture of silverleaf and frostwort. It will suppress your cycles. It is not pleasant. It will make you feel cold and dull, but it will keep that scent under control. You will drink it every morning, in my presence." He set it on the chest with a decisive click. A new chain. "And if I refuse?" The defiance was weak, but I had to voice it. He took 2 steps until he was standing over me. I had to crane my neck to meet his eyes. In the near dark, they looked black. "Then you are no longer a problem I can manage," he said, each word precise and icy. "You become a danger to my pack's stability, and I will have to treat you as such. The cell will become a true cell. The escort will become shackles. The choice is yours, Sable, but it is the only choice you get." He was giving me the illusion of control while removing all of it, a master strategist, even in this. I looked from his impassive face to the dark bottle. The ember inside me pulsed, a silent protest. Taking it felt like surrendering the last piece of myself, the wild, hidden truth I'd protected for so long. But not taking it meant becoming a beast in a cage or worse. Why? The word escaped, raw and quiet. Why not just let them have me? Why go through this management? For a long moment he was silent. I thought he wouldn't answer. Then he spoke, his voice dropping so low I felt it more than heard it. "Because when that scent hit me in the hall," he said, "I didn't just see a weapon or a prize." His jaw tightened. "I saw a wolf of immense power hiding in plain sight from fools. I saw a resource my enemy was too blind to value, and I take what is of value." He leaned down, just slightly, his scent enveloping me. "Your debt to Silverfang is paid. Your debt to me starts now. You belong to Ironclaw, and I do not waste what is mine." He straightened, turned, and left. The door closed. The lock turned. I was alone with the cold, the stone, and the dark bottle that promised a different kind of oblivion. The cage had no bars, but its walls were absolute. The tincture tasted like winter's corpse. It was a bitter, chalky sludge that coated my tongue and throat, leaving a numbness behind. True to Thorn's word, a slow chill seeped into my limbs, a dulling fog settling over my senses. The ember inside me didn't go out, but it was smothered, buried under layers of chemical frost. It felt like being wrapped in damp wool, muffled, heavy, slow. Rook came at dawn with the key and a bundle of clothes. Simple, sturdy trousers and a tunic in drab brown, the rough-spun fabric of an Ironclaw labourer. No dress, no pretense. "Your work," he said, his tone leaving no room for debate. "Idle hands are dangerous hands, and the pack needs to see you're not a pampered prize." He escorted me not to a scullery, but to the fortress's main hall, a space as different from Silverfang's opulent chamber as stone is from silk. It was a vast, high-ceilinged armoury of a room, built for function, not ceremony. Long trestle tables, scarred from use, a massive hearth at one end where a fire perpetually burned. The walls were hung with worn banners and the tools of survival, hunting bows, fishing nets, maps, and everywhere the eyes. They were on me the moment I stepped from the stone corridor. Wolves paused in their tasks, mending gear, sorting supplies, sharpening blades. The air, previously filled with the comfortable clatter of morning, thickened. Scents changed. Curiosity curdled into suspicion, into outright hostility. Rook positioned me at a side table piled with mending, torn cloaks, ripped packs, worn leather straps. "Here. Needle and thread are in the basket. You know how to use them?" I nodded, the motion stiff. I'd spent a lifetime mending Silverfang finery. "Good. You sit. You work. You don't speak unless spoken to. You don't make eye contact. You are a ghost. Remember it." He took a seat at the head of the nearest long table, within sight but not within reach, and began reviewing a ledger. My guard and my warden. I picked up a ripped wool cloak, the dark green of the Ironclaw Scouts. The first prick of the needle through the fabric was a tiny familiar rebellion. This I can do. I bent my head, making myself small, invisible. The whispers began as a hiss, then grew bolder. "That's her. Looks scrawny. Smell that? Nothing. He's already drugged her up. Wise. Ronan's whelp. Has his eyes. Makes my skin crawl. Why bring that poison here? Should have left her to rot." The words were needles, finer and sharper than the one in my hand. They found the seams in the numbness the tincture provided. I focused on the stitch. In, out, pull tight. In, out, pull tight. An hour passed. The initial shock of my presence wore into a simmering, watchful resentment. Then a shadow fell over my work. I looked up against Rook's advice. A she-wolf stood over me, maybe a few years older. She was tall, muscular, with a thick braid of reddish hair and eyes like chips of flint. Her scent was aggressive, territorial, wet stone and thorny brush. She held a wooden tankard loosely in one hand. "So," she said, her voice carrying, "the Silver Fang bitch can sew! Can you fight? Or is that all your traitor blood is good for?" A few low chuckles rippled from a nearby group. Rook looked up from his ledger, his expression watchful but unmoving. "A test." I lowered my eyes back to the cloak. "I'm here to mend," I said, my voice barely audible. "I asked you a question," she said, leaning closer. The sour smell of cheap ale wafted from her. "Can you fight?" She tapped the tankard against the edge of my table, a threatening tap, tap, tap. The ember under the frost gave a weak, furious pulse. My fingers tightened on the needle. The old, familiar script demanded I cower, to shrink, to apologize for my existence. But something was different. I was not in Silverfang Hall. The rules had changed. Here, cowering was an invitation. Submission was a prelude to a beating. I set the needle down carefully. I looked up, meeting her flinty gaze. I didn't stand. I made myself still, like the cold stone of my cell. "My blood is my own," I said, my voice finding a flat, quiet steadiness I didn't feel. "And my hands are busy with the Alpha's work. If you have a problem with my task, take it up with Rook, or with Thorn." Her eyes widened, then narrowed. The use of the Alpha's given names so casually was a calculated risk. It implied an intimacy I did not have. A connection that placed me, however tenuously, under his direct shadow. She glanced at Rook. He was staring directly at her now, his face impassive, but his posture radiating a silent warning. She looked back at me, her lip curling. "Clever words," she sneered, but the heat had gone out of her attack. The tankard stopped tapping. "We'll see how clever you are when winter comes and your soft Silverfang hands freeze stiff." She turned and stalked away, her friends falling in beside her with muttered disappointment. The hall was quiet again, the tension slightly diffused. I picked up my needle, my hands were trembling, but I forced the next stitch. From across the room, I felt a gaze heavier than the she-wolf's. I didn't need to look to know it was Thorn. He stood in the arched entrance to the hall, having entered silently. How much had he seen? His expression was unreadable from this distance, but his presence was a fresh wave of pine and iron that cut through the stale air of the hall. He didn't approach me, he simply watched for a long moment, then turned and spoke quietly to a warrior beside him. Rook caught my eye and gave me a single, slow nod. It wasn't approval, it was acknowledgement. I had passed the first, smallest test. I had not broken. I had not fought. I had used the only weapon I had, the Alpha's own claim, like a shield held at arm's length. I went back to my mending. The whispers didn't stop, but they grew quieter, more wary. The venom was still in the air, but I had shown I wasn't a passive victim to be swallowed by it. I was a thorn they'd have to pry out carefully. And all the while, through the chemical fog, I was acutely aware of him, a constant simmering presence at the edge of my senses, the true source of the venom, and the only inexplicable antidote. The frost in my veins had become a companion. The tincture's chill was a predictable blanket, smothering the chaos, and with it the last flickers of feeling. I moved through the Ironclaw fortress like a ghost who'd forgotten how to haunt, my footsteps silent on stone, my presence a dull grey smudge against their vibrant, hostile colours. Then he broke the routine. Rook came not at dawn, but in the deep indigo of late twilight. His expression was unreadable. "The Alpha wants you," in his quarters. No explanation, just the deviation, a crack in the cold, hard schedule of my captivity. He led me not to the main hall, but up a tight, spiralling staircase carved into the fortress's outer wall to a lone door of dark, age-blackened oak at the top of the western tower. Rook knocked once, a sharp, military rap, and pushed the door open, ushering me inside before closing it softly behind me, leaving me alone. With him. Thorn's quarters were not a den, they were a command post. A place of stark, severe utility. A massive fireplace held a low, greedy fire that cast restless shadows over walls lined with maps and weapon racks. A broad, scarred table served as a desk, piled with scrolls, ledgers, and a single, stark oil lamp. There were no furs, no trophies, no comforts, just stone, wood, iron, and the overwhelming, saturated scent of him. It was so potent here it felt like a physical pressure against my muted senses. He stood by the fire, his back to me, a silhouette of coiled tension against the flames. He didn't speak. He didn't turn. I stood just inside the door, the cold from the tincture warring with a new, sharp prickle of alarm. The silence stretched, thin and taut as a wire. "Sit," he said finally, his voice a low rasp that seemed to come from the stones themselves. He gestured with a slight tilt of his head toward a single heavy wooden chair facing the desk. It wasn't an invitation. It was a placement. I moved to the chair and sat, my posture rigid. The numbness was my armour. I wrapped it tightly around me. He turned then. The firelight played across his face, etching the harsh lines deeper, gilding the pale grey of his eyes with flecks of molten amber. He looked at me, a long, assessing look that felt like being stripped bare, layer by chemical layer. "Your father," he began, and the word was a blade unsheathed in the quiet room. "Ronan, tell me about the day he betrayed the truce." The demand was so direct, so brutal, it momentarily pierced the fog. He didn't want my life story. He wanted a specific wound probed. "I have nothing to tell," I said, my voice flat, the one I used for mending. "I was a child. I saw nothing. You lived with him. You ate with him. You were his blood." He took a step closer, his shadow falling over me. Did he seem like a man planning murder? Was he restless, angry? Did he speak of Ironclaw, of my brother? Each question was a needle seeking a nerve. I saw it then. This wasn't about gathering facts. The facts were written in blood and history. This was about feeding a different hunger, the hunger of a man who has been denied a why. "He was my father," I said, the words ash in my mouth. "Before he was the betrayer, he laughed. He carved me little wolves from firewood. He smelled of cedar and ink." I lifted my gaze to meet his, letting him see the hollow truth. The man you hate and the man I loved were the same person. I have no explanation that will satisfy you. A muscle in his jaw twitched. My answer, my refusal to give him a clean monster to hate, seemed to anger him more. "Your loyalty is misplaced," he snapped, a flicker of that hall fury returning. "He doomed you. He made you this. A pariah, a bargaining chip. And you cling to his memory?" The ember under the frost gave a weak, spasmodic pulse. "I cling to nothing," I hissed, the numbness cracking. "You took everything. My pack, my freedom, even my own biology. You drug me into a stupor and put me to work like a trained mule. What is there left to cling to, Thorn? The sharp taste of your medicine, the chill of my stone cell?" The use of his name, thrown like a rock, echoed in the room. His eyes narrowed, a dangerous spark igniting in their depths. He leaned down, bracing his hands on the arms of my chair, caging me in. His scent, this close, was an assault, a blizzard of pine in a forge's heart, overwhelming the chemical barrier in my system. For a terrifying second, I felt the frost inside me melt at the edges. "You think this is cruelty?" His voice was a low, vibrating growl. "You think a cell and a potion is the worst I can do? You have no concept of what you are, Sable. You are a wildfire in a world of dry kindling. I am not your jailer. I am the dam holding back the flood that would drown you." "Then let me drown!" The cry was torn from me, raw and sudden. "You didn't save me! You claimed me! There's a difference! You took me for the same reason Gareth gave me, because I was a thing to be used to settle a score." He recoiled as if struck. He struck, his face a mask of turbulent stone. He stared at me, his chest rising and falling with a rhythm that spoke of a terrible, contained violence. Then he turned on his heel and strode to the far wall, to a large, detailed map of the territories. His finger stabbed a point just beyond the inked border of Ironclaw lands. A dense patch of forest marked the whispering dark. "You speak of freedom?" he said, his voice now terrifyingly calm. "You see this? The woods begin 1/2 mile from the western wall. They are deep, they are neutral ground, unpatrolled tonight." He turned back to me, his eyes like chips of glacial ice. "Go." The word hung in the air, senseless. "What? You want to be free of the dam, of the cage, of me?" He took a step toward me, his every movement predatory. "Then run, now, out the gate, into the dark. If you make it to the Silverfang border by dawn, you're free. I will consider the debt void. You can go back to scrubbing their floors if they'll have you." My heart was a frantic, trapped bird against my ribs. This was a trick. It had to be. "And if I don't make it?" I whispered. A cold, mirthless smile touched his lips. It was the most frightening expression I'd ever seen on him. "If my hunters find you? If the rogues that haunt those woods find you first? If you simply get lost and the winter cold takes you?" He shrugged, a gesture of utter indifference that froze the blood in my veins. Then the problem solves itself. The debt is still void. Either way, I am unburdened. He was giving me a choice, the slow death of the cage or the sharp, wild gamble of the woods. A test of survival with my life as the wager. It wasn't freedom he was offering. It was a different kind of sentence. He walked to the tower door and pulled it open. The cold night air rushed in, smelling of pine needles and distant frost. It was the smell of the map, the smell of the whispering dark. "The choice is yours," he said, his figure framed in the doorway. "Stay and live as my controlled muted ghost, or run and see what fate you truly deserve." He left, leaving the door yawning open to the dark stairwell. I sat in the chair, the ghost of his heat still in the air around me, the vast hungry silence of the wilderness calling from beyond the walls. The edge of the woods wasn't on the map. It was here, in this room, in the space between the chair and the open door. The open door breathed. Cold, raw air laced with the perfume of night-blooming frost heather and the profound, earthy silence of deep forest poured into the tower room. It was a tangible thing, that invitation to the dark. It whispered of freedom with a forked tongue, promising escape in one breath and oblivion in the next. My body remained in the chair, carved from the same frozen numbness the tincture provided. But inside, a seismic shift was tearing through the permafrost. Run. The word was a drumbeat in my skull, primal and insistent. I could see it. Darting down the spiral stairs, a shadow among shadows, slipping through the postern gate. There was always a weak point, a moment of inattention. Then the tree line, the swallowing dark of the whispering woods. My blood, even muted, sang with a wild, atavistic recognition of the hunt. It would be a clean end, swift in the jaws of a rogue or slow in the embrace of the cold. But it would be mine, my choice, my end. I stood, my legs held. I took one step, then another, toward the doorway, toward that intoxicating slice of freedom. The stone of the fortress seemed to lean away from me, eager to be rid of its problem. But my feet stopped on the threshold. I looked back, not at the room, but at the life he had outlined. The controlled ghost, the daily draught of frost, the mending, the silence, the contempt. A slow, meticulous unravelling of everything I was until nothing remained but the hollow shell of the traitor's daughter. And something in me, something deeper than fear, older than the tincture, rebelled. It wasn't courage. It was a darker, more stubborn thing. Spite. He wanted me to run. He had all but painted a path to the woods with his indifference. He expected the scared, broken creature from the hall to bolt for the imagined safety of the trees, to make his problem vanish. To prove him right, that I was a wildfire needing a dam, a chaos needing containment. What if I didn't? What if I chose the cage, not out of submission, but as a form of defiance? To be the persistent, inconvenient truth in his sterile fortress, to force him to look at the consequence of his claim every single day? The cold night air kissed my face. I took a deep, shuddering breath of it, letting the wild promise sear my lungs. Then I turned my back on it. I closed the tower door. The thud of solid oak was louder than any scream. It sealed me in, with my choice. With him. I didn't return to my cell. I stood there in the empty corridor at the top of the tower, the weight of my decisions settling on my shoulders like a mantle of lead. I had chosen the known devil. Now I had to live in his hell. The next morning, when Rook came with the key and the tincture, he found me waiting, dressed, my palette neatly made. His eyes, sharp as ever, scanned my face for signs of madness, of despair. He saw none. He saw only a different kind of stillness. I drank the bitter draught under his watchful gaze without flinching. The frost spread through me. Familiar now, an ally in my new silent war. Work in the great hall was the same tapestry of hostility. The reddish-haired she-wolf, whose name I'd learned was Mara, watched me with a new, speculative glint. The story of the open tower door hadn't spread, but a new tension radiated from Thorn, and the pack sensed it. Then the crack appeared. It began with a whimper, a small, ragged sound of pain that cut through the low murmur of the hall. A young boy, maybe 5 years old, was curled on a bench by the hearth, his face flushed and beaded with sweat. His mother, a woman with worry-etched lines around her eyes, hovered helplessly as an older male, the pack's healer, I presumed, shook his head, packing his herb satchel. "The fever won't break, Liana," the healer said, his voice strained. "It's the lung sickness. My poultices are useless. I've sent for Yara, but she's a day's ride north at the outpost. The mother's face crumpled. The boy whimpered again, a dry, hacking sound. A memory surfaced sharp and clear through the tincture's haze. Myself, perhaps the same age, burning with fever in the Silverfang healer's quarters. My father, not the betrayer yet, just my father, whispering as he smoothed a foul-smelling paste on my chest. Sage from the south slope crushed with honey and a pinch of pepper fire. Burns the sickness out, little wolf. It was a whisper from a dead man, a fragment of a life erased. I didn't think. I just moved. I set down the torn tunic I was mending and walked toward the hearth. The conversation around the boy died. Dozens of eyes tracked me, hostile, suspicious. Rook stood, a warning in his posture. I ignored him. I knelt beside the bench, not touching the boy, and looked at his mother. "May I?" Her eyes were wide with fear and a flicker of desperate hope. She glanced toward the high table, where Thorn had gone utterly still, watching. "What can you do?" she whispered. "My father!" I said, the word tasting of ash, knew an old remedy for lung fever. It requires sage, fresh honey, and fire pepper. The healer scoffed. "Pepper will inflame him further." "A pinch," I said, my voice low but clear in the silent hall. "To create heat from within, to match the fever and trick the body into breaking it. The honey soothes the burn, the sage cleanses." I met the mother's eyes. "I have no poison for you, only a memory." A long, taut silence stretched. The boy coughed, a painful, wet rattle. "Do it," a voice said. It wasn't the mother. It came from the high table. Thorn. He hadn't moved. His face was unreadable, but his command hung in the air. Absolute. The mother nodded, a quick, frantic motion. I worked quickly, with a focus that shut out the staring eyes, the held breaths. I directed the mother to the kitchen for the ingredients. I crushed the sage leaves myself on the hearthstone, mixed in the golden honey, and with careful, precise fingers, added a single daring grain of crushed fire pepper. The paste was vibrant green, pungent and sweet. I showed the mother how to spread it thinly on the boy's chest. He cried out at the first touch, a sharp sting, then settled as the warmth spread. I covered it with a clean linen cloth. "Keep him by the fire, make him sip willow bark tea. The fever will climb before it breaks. Don't be afraid." I rose, my hands sticky with honey and herbs. I didn't look at Thorn. I walked back to my mending table, the path clearing before me. The pack's stares were no longer just hostile. They were shocked, confused. Hours passed. The hall's activity resumed, but a new current hummed beneath the surface. Whispers now carried a different tone. She knew a remedy. The Alpha let her. As the afternoon light faded, a soft cry came from the hearth. Not of pain, but of relief. The boy was sitting up, sipping water, his brow damp with normal sweat. The fever had broken. His mother looked across the hall at me. She didn't smile, but she gave a single, slow, solemn nod, an acknowledgement, a thread of connection in a web of hatred. That night, when Rook came to lock me in my cell, he didn't speak, but his gaze lingered on me a moment longer than usual. Later, long after the fortress had fallen into the deep silence of midnight, the key turned in my lock again. The door opened. Thorn stood there, framed in the gloom of the torchlit corridor. He held nothing, said nothing. His eyes found mine in the dark. Then he stepped inside just far enough to place a single object on the wooden chest beside my untouched dinner tray. It was a knife, small, sharp, bone-handled. A hunter's skinning knife, well used but meticulously cared for, the edge gleaming in the low light. He looked from the knife to my face. His expression was impossible to decipher, a storm of something that might have been respect or fury or a terrifying new calculation. Without a word, he turned and left, closing the door softly behind him. The lock did not turn. I stared at the knife. It wasn't a key, it wasn't freedom, it was a test. A weapon, a thread, the first hairline crack in the stone. The knife glinted, the door stood shut, but the silence behind it was empty. No key turned. My heart was a frantic drum against the cage of my ribs. A test. It had to be a test. Leave a weapon with the prisoner, leave the door unsecured, and see what she does. The correct answer was to leave both untouched, to prove my docility. But the correct answer had died in the tower when I chose the cage. I moved on silent feet. My fingers closed around the bone handle. It was cool, solid, perfectly balanced. A tool, not a jewel. I slipped it into the leather waistcoat of my trousers, the weight a secret against my hip. Then I faced the door. I pressed my ear to the cold oak. Nothing. No guard's breath, no shifting boot. I wrapped my hand around the iron handle, took a breath that did nothing to steady me, and pulled. It opened without a sound, well-oiled. The torchlit corridor stretched left and right, empty. The fortress slept. My pulse roared in my ears, louder than any footstep. This was his territory. Every shadow, every turn was known to him. I was a mouse let loose in a hawk's mews. I turned not toward the outer walls and freedom, but inward, deeper into the den. I navigated by memory and scent, a ghost in the stone gut of Ironclaw. I found the small infirmary closet off the great hall. Inside I took only 2 things, a roll of clean linen bandages and a pouch of dried yarrow from the healer's stores. Payment for the knife. Back in my cell, I left the supplies on the chest beside the empty tray. Then I took the knife. Not to hide it. I placed it deliberately beside the yarrow, its blade pointing toward the door. I sat on my pallet facing the entrance and waited. He came just before true dawn. The door opened and he filled the frame. His eyes went immediately to the chest, to the knife, the linen, the yarrow. His gaze lingered, then lifted to me. The chill in the room deepened. Explain. A single word. Frost rhymed. You gave me a weapon, I said, my voice thin but clear in the quiet. A fortress has many kinds of wounds. I took the means to bind one. You left your cell. You unlocked it. A long, dangerous silence. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. He picked up the knife, his thumb testing the edge. You could have gone for my throat, or your own. You said it yourself. I am a resource, wasted if destroyed. I met his storm grey eyes, and you are a debt I intend to repay, in my own way. He stared at me, and for the first time I saw not the Alpha, not the Avenger, but a man confronting an equation that had suddenly, fundamentally changed. I was no longer a variable to be controlled. I was an agent making choices. He sheathed the knife at his own belt. The door will remain unlocked at night, he said, the words a concession that felt like a victory carved in ice. You will not leave the inner fortress walls. You will continue your work, and you will take the tincture at dawn. His eyes hardened. This is not trust, this is a new calculation. I know, I said. He left, leaving the door ajar. The cage still existed, but its boundaries had just expanded. I had traded a lock for a leash, and I had placed the first item of value, my will, onto the scales between us. The new reality was a tense, silent dance. The unlocked door was a spectre in the pack's mind. My nightly freedom was an open secret, a simmering outrage. Mara's faction growled that Thorn had gone soft, bewitched by the Omega's wiles. Others, like Liana and a few older warriors who'd seen the healed boy thriving, watched with cautious neutrality. The tincture remained my morning penance, the frost in my veins a constant companion. But within its chill, a new clarity was growing. I was learning the fortress's rhythms, its whispers, its flaws. Then the howls came. Not from within, but from beyond the western wall. Long, piercing cries that spoke of no natural wolf. Rogues. A large pack, desperate or bold, drawn by some unknown scarcity or weakness. The fortress erupted into controlled chaos, gates slammed, warriors, thorn at their head, streamed onto the high battlements. From my cell doorway I saw the panic in the lower corridors, mothers clutching children, the old and the sick being ushered into the inner stronghold, and I saw the floor. The ancient infirmary was in a vulnerable outer yard. The healer, Yara, was still away. Only her young apprentice remained, his face white as he tried to rally helpers to move supplies. I didn't think. I moved. I became a ghost with a purpose, slipping into the storeroom, grabbing armfuls of bandages, jars of honey, sacks of healing herbs. I directed trembling kitchen girls to boil water and tear linen. I carved out a space in a guarded inner corridor, creating a makeshift aid station. When the first wounded were carried in, not from rogue claws yet, but from a falling guard who'd slipped on the icy battlements, I was ready. I cleaned the gash on his temple, packed it with yarrow and honey, bound it tight. My hands were steady. The frost within me kept the panic at bay, leaving only cold, clear procedure. Thorn found me there, my hands bloodied, directing the boiling water to be cooled for cleaning. He stood at the edge of the chaotic scene, a statue of war still smelling of night wind and violence. Our eyes met across the crowded space. In his gaze, I saw the shattered calculation. I was not hiding, I was organising, using the knowledge he'd dismissed as soft silver-fang tricks to fortify his pack from within. A warrior rushed to him, whispering urgently. The rogue attack was a feint. The main force was digging at the old postern gate, the one I had mentally noted as weak. Thorn's eyes flashed back to me, a sudden blazing intensity in them. "You," he commanded, pointing. "With me." It wasn't a request. I followed, my heart hammering. He didn't lead me to the walls, but to the armory near the postern. He thrust a light bow and a quiver of arrows into my hands. "You said you can mend. Can you aim?" "My father taught me," I said, the old ache a dull throb. "Then defend your home." He said your home, not your cage. Then he was gone, a shadow heading to the breach. I climbed to a narrow servicing ledge overlooking the postern yard. Below, a hulking rogue was heaving at the cracked gate with a log. I nocked an arrow, the motion unfamiliar, but the memory in my muscles true. I breathed out, letting the chemical frost steady my aim. I fired. The arrow thudded into the rogue's shoulder, not a kill shot, but a shriek of surprise and pain. It broke his rhythm. In that moment of distraction, an Ironclaw defender speared him from the wall. I didn't kill, but I had helped protect the wall. As the rogue band broke and fled with the rising sun, the fortress fell into an exhausted, victorious silence. I stood on my ledge, the bow hanging loose in my hand, the scent of blood, sweat, and my own muted power thick in the air. Thorn looked up from the secured gate, his face smeared with soot and someone else's blood. He didn't nod, he didn't smile, but he saw me, truly saw me. Not the ghost, the prize, or the problem. He saw a weapon he hadn't forged, but one that had chosen to fight for his pack. The morning after the attack, the Great Hall felt different. The air hummed with relief and a brittle energy. The pack broke their fast, injuries bound, eyes hollow but alive. And their glances toward me were no longer just contempt or curiosity. They were assessment. I had stepped out of my assigned shadow. Thorn sat at the high table, Rook at his side. He hadn't summoned me for the tincture. The small bottle sat untouched between us on the table as the hall slowly filled. Mara stood, her voice cutting through the murmur. "Alpha, the rogue scum are scattered. But this," she gestured broadly, her gaze sweeping to me where I sat at my usual mending table. "This disruption remains. She was on the walls, with a weapon, an Omega, armed in our midst. The danger is not past. It's been invited inside." A rumble of agreement from her faction. Thorn's expression was unraidable. She held the line at the postern gate. She organised the wounded. Her actions served Ironclaw. "A trick!" Mara spat. "To lull us. Her blood is traitor's blood. It cannot be cleansed." The old familiar script, the unshakable label. A cold fire, different from the heat of my biology, ignited in my chest. It was a clean, sharp anger. I stood. Every eye turned to me. A low warning growl came from Rook. Thorn held up a hand, silencing him. He watched me, his eyes a challenge. "Speak." I did not look at Mara. I looked at Liana, at the boy now healthy beside her. I looked at the guard whose head I'd bandaged, now nodding at me grimly. I looked at the weathered warriors who'd seen me fire the bow. Finally, I looked at Thorn. "My blood is my own," I said, my voice carrying in the stone hall without shouting. "It carries a memory of betrayal I did not commit, and a memory of healing I chose to use. You named me a debt, Alpha Thorn, a problem to manage." I took a step forward toward the high table. "But a problem that fights for your pack is no longer a problem. It is an asset. And an asset has terms." A shocked silence. No one spoke to the Alpha like this. Thorn leaned forward, his elbows on the table, steepling his fingers. "State your terms." "The tincture stops," I said, the words definitive. "You control me by fearing what I am. I will control it myself. I will learn. With Yara the healer, if she'll have me, my biology is not a weakness to be drugged. It is a part of the weapon you keep." Mara hissed. "Arrogant witch!" Thorn ignored her. And I am not a servant nor a symbol in a cell. I am Sable. If I am to be of Ironclaw, then I will be of it, not as a ghost, but as a wolf, with a wolf's rights and a wolf's responsibilities. The hall was utterly still. I was redrawing the lines of my existence in front of the entire pack, gambling everything on the value I had just proven. Thorn held my gaze for an eternity. The memory of the unlocked door, the knife, the bandages, the arrow on the wall, it all passed between us in that silent look. He reached for the small, dark bottle of tincture. He picked it up, examined it, and then, without a word, he dropped it onto the stone floor. It shattered. The bitter, chemical scent bloomed and died. "The tincture stops," he echoed, his voice final. You will train with Yara. You will have the rights of a pack member under probation. His eyes narrowed, the Alpha's decree settling like iron. But the responsibility is absolute. Your first mistake, your first loss of control that endangers this pack, and the consequences will be worse than any cell. Do you understand? It was not freedom. It was a promotion from prisoner to soldier. From a thing owned to a wolf bound by a fiercer, more dangerous code. I understand, I said. He gave a single, sharp nod. Then he looked out at his pack, his gaze sweeping over Mara's furious face, over the uncertain, the thoughtful, the accepting. She is under my protection and my law. Her debts are her own to settle, with me. He stood, his presence dominating the hall. The matter is closed. He left the high table, his stride leaving no room for debate. As he passed my table, he paused for a fraction of a second. His voice was for me alone, a low rumble that vibrated in my bones. The knife is in your chest. Use it well, Sable. He moved on. I looked down at the shattered glass at the foot of the high table, the last physical remnant of my chemical prison melting into the stone. The frost in my veins was already beginning to thaw, a terrifying, thrilling warmth stirring in its place. I was no longer the traitor's daughter. I was not yet a true Ironclaw. I was something new, something uncharted. I had traded a locked cage for a seat at the edge of the pack fire, with the eyes of enemies and potential allies upon me, and the gaze of my most dangerous ally, my Alpha, my creditor, my inevitable storm, burning a path against my skin. The game was no longer about survival, it was about power, and I had just placed my first piece on the board.